There we go. Let's dive in. Hopefully, electronics hold up. Anyway, Hardy Haberman is tall and well spoken. When I first met him, I was impressed by his confident physical presence and self assurance. He grew up in a scientific home. His father was the head of the International Society of Hematology, so study of blood, and his mother was his father's private secretary. As a young child, he spent most hours in his dad's lab playing with slides and microscopes. He is a longtime political activist, filmmaker, and author with a keen eye for the politics of his sexuality and our lives. So basically, he's looking at the sciency side of human interaction with LGBTQ, leather community. I'm not sure if spandex, because again, I haven't read this chapter yet, so we'll see. In 1972, he took part in Dallas's first Pride event. So 1972, let me see when specifically Stonewall is. I know I'm a bad gay. I should know this off the top of my head. Let me see here. This is why we have our search engine right in front of us. Stonewall took place in 1969. So that would be when tensions were still pretty, high end, a little iffy. Let's see here. In 1972, he took part in Dallas's first Pride event. In 1980 Pride Week, he co-produced the city's first Cedar Springs Carnival. He is well known as an educator in the leather community. So, if you don't know, leather community kind of grew up alongside the LGBTQ community. They were both heavily ostracized, meaning they were both heavily looked down upon in society. They were seen as deviants and not good people to, associate with. He has been a guest speaker in college in courses on history of sexuality and taught classes and events such as Texas Leather Pride in Austin, Sit in the City in Las Vegas, Southeast Leather Fest in Atlanta, and Kinky College in Chicago, as well as having discussion groups in many places in US and Canada. On that note, I do want to say, I'm really hoping Twitch doesn't hammer me for this, but this is important. The KINK community, again, trying to avoid Twitch censorship here, and LGBT are basically cousins. I consider them first cousins. They both have faced a lot of strife and hardship. And growing science studies say, in regards to human brain, how we interact with people, etc., the line between KINK and that circle of life and the LGBTQ it's getting thinner and thinner. So they belong at Pride. Now, in regards to actions upon another, that might be, the after party 18 plus part, but in regards to just showing up at Pride, in public, appropriate, attire, that's fine. Let's see here. Hardy has written 5 books and has made a number of films. Leather, 1996, and Out of the Darkness: The Reality of SM, 2001. Might have to check that out. Depicts aspects of kink culture. He also has made 2 lesbian adult films and a documentary on the Texas State Fair. His films have won numerous awards and have been screened in festivals around the world. He is currently co-chair of the board of directors of the Woodhull of Freedom Foundation, also known as the Woodhull Sexual Freedom Alliance, and an active member of the Cathedral of Hope Church in Dallas, one of the largest LGBTQ congregations in the world. I do want to give my little 2 cents here. I am extremely uncomfortable with the idea of churches at Pride. And the primary reason for that is that religion and pride, so LGBTQ, they have a lot of trauma there. A lot of kids have been forced to go to conversion camps. Adults have been forced to go to conversion camps in the name of religion. And I understand a lot of modern churches are trying to change that perception, which, I applaud. At the same time, you cannot ignore the horrific atrocities that have happened in the name of religion that have hurt and or gotten rid of LGBTQ people. Again, I got to mind my language because of the censorship, which sucks. But, I don't want to lose potential audience here because this is important. This is why I'm reading this. For the past 24 years, he has been in a relationship with Patrick Ryan, whom he calls his boy. Oh, that's cute. He also has a great sense of irony. When I interviewed him in his hometown of Dallas, he called himself a mid century modern, and we both laughed. Uh, the interviewer is the author of this book, Miss Jane. When I interviewed him in his hometown of Dallas, he called himself a mid century modern, and we both laughed. I just read that. Asked what influenced him, and he identified his parents, the gay rights movement, and the fight for civil rights. He sees his life as a series of keyframes. In filmmaking, a keyframe is an image that defines the start or end of transition. In fact, the autobiography he's working on will be titled Keyframes. I asked him where he was on the night of June 28th, 1969, and he took it from there. So, Stonewall. In 1969, I was probably back in Dallas. I had been going to college at Baylor University in Waco, but in counseling they told me maybe you'd be happier at another school. I now look back and think that was great advice. I was back in Dallas, but I didn't see anything on the news about Stonewall. The following morning, I was watching the Today Show. Frank Blair was on, he was the news guy, and somebody ran into the studio screaming about gay power. He tried to take the mic away from Frank Blair, and Blair apologized, and then they reported about what was going on that weekend: homosexuality in America. In the 1960s, I was out, but I was in. People came out and they go back in. I never hid my sexuality, I was just questioning it a lot. In high school, I had dated girls, but all my close friends were guys. And I had a lot of eschual, again, censors, I hate it, but algorithm be algorithming, experiences with guys. When I was 18, I came out to my mom. After she stopped crying and saying, "Oh, I'll never have grandchildren," she started trying to set me up with guys. That's adorable, especially in that time period. This was way before, rainbow capitalism. No, I said, "No, I don't do that." So I was just low key. Stonewall didn't affect me as much as the 1964 Life magazine issue on the homosexuals. I was on an airplane going to Paris with my family, so I'm reading this Life magazine and I see this centerfold with the bar in there, and there's, the toolbox. And I'm getting excited. And there was something in there that I wanted, whatever that was. I didn't read much, but I just kept looking at the picture. Looking back, it's not a sexy picture, but I did find that I didn't know if it had a direct effect. But after that, I started getting more involved. So this is probably the picture he's referencing. If you can't really see it because it's kind of a dark contrasted photo, it says image from Life magazine article Homosexuality in America 1964. And if I had to describe this, I would say it looks like a black and white image. There are a bunch of men in what looks like slightly open leather jackets and similar. I'm assuming those are jeans. We see a lot of black silhouettes of men here, and I'm assuming that's like a painting on the wall, um, with a bunch of men that looks like in tank tops and leather. So I'm assuming this is kind of what he's hinting at, spurring his interest in leather. My dad died when I was 18 before I went out to college. My mom was kind of bouncing around for a while because she and him had been very close. She was very much a frustrated hippie. Her motto was, "If it feels good, do it." I started playing soul music and she was into that. She liked Jimi Hendrix. She was really an interesting person, so she being the mom. Jimi Hendrix, if you don't know, was a really big guitarist. That's the sum of that in regards to this. So great musician. Him exploring himself in college. College was a difficult time. Again, if I rephrase things or kind of what sounds like slur the words together, it's so censorship. I hate it, but the internet be the internet with social media. College was a difficult time. It was the first time I'd lived away from home. My roommate didn't show up, so I had a single dorm room. It was just me. People figured out I was gay. I didn't announce it, but they figured it out. And they figured out I was liberal. They had a group down there called Young Americans for Freedom, which is basically the Junior John Birch Society. They had me on their enemy list because I was a philosophy major and because I went to anti-war marches. And because I hung out with the Catholic Student Union, which was where all the liberals hung out. Gotta take a drink of water here. Remember, stay hydrated, people. I never struggled with my sense of self. Well, I struggled with it when I was in college a little bit when I came out to my counselor. And that's when he told me I'd probably be happier at another school. I had two strikes against me. I was a Jew at Baylor, the Jew, the only one. Baylor is a Baptist school and has a big theology department, and I was taking philosophy at the time. Big project. Let's let's go witness the Jew. I was like, did I skip a word? Yes, I did. It's a miracle that I ever converted to Christianity after being witnessed to on a regular basis by second and third year theology students. Yeah, that'd be a little awkward. What's funny is that one of my close friends was in the ROTC. ROTC is basically prep for military. And he's a guy who taught me how to polish boots. We'd sit up in the dorm rooms and talk and polish boots. That's how I really got a big interest wink for boots. That is definitely a part of the I think it's called Black Boot community. I'm not as familiar with it, and I only say that because that circle of interest within the giant umbrella that is human S interest wink, it just never really interested me that much. I know lightly about it, but again, we are learning today, children and adults and everyone else who's listening to this. I used to play Radio Cuba on my radio just to mess with people. Again, censorship. I remember vividly someone who I thought was my friend, although I didn't know him well, came into my dorm room and started teasing me, bullying me, and it ended up trying to seriously hurt me while calling me names. I sort of blacked all that out. Then it came to me. Wow, maybe that's why I'm so interested in trying to prevent this kind of abuse. The guy tried to force an anatomy part into him again. Censorship. I hate it. So I wrote about it in the article in the Dallas Voice. I outed myself as a R victim in the article because I think it's important. You're only as sick as your secrets, and I don't think it's a good thing to hide them. I have this weird philosophy that you're supposed to walk the walk, so I try to do it. Again, this is his perspective. I got involved with the Out of the Darkness film because of the difference between SM. I'm really hoping I can say this word. Consensual adults practicing hurting each other and enjoying the pain. S period M period. Again, I hate this censorship. And abuse. And okay, so he made this film Out of the Darkness to explain the difference between non-consensual pain, so a partner purposely hurting you, and someone who says, hey, I agree to, I don't know, use this on your arm. And again, if you're listening, it's like a little uh, wrist thing. I agree to consensually use this on your arm, and you say, yay, this feels good because of endorphins. And then, we stop before serious bruising or anything happens. So he made this film to explain the difference between the two. And there is a big difference. When you're in the scene, they don't bear a resemblance to one another. This is accurate. Even though on the surface there is something physically, potentially violent going on, it's not the same thing. Context is everything. Again, very true. I've always been interested in that. I've known people who have been seriously hurt by a partner. The woman I used to live with, her sister lived in Dallas, one floor down from us in the apartment building. She was our word. Some guy broke into the apartment, did it to her, and jumped out the window. So I got some insight into that being close to her and knowing what was going on. I didn't even think about me, but maybe that's why I empathized. So I'm assuming he's referring to how another person forcefully came into his room and tried to hurt him in a way that I hate that I have to censor because these things happen and they hurt people. All right, new area. Sundance, kids, and leather, but no Martins. Around the time of Stonewall, I began getting active in the gay rights community movement because it struck a chord. The movement was very active. I joined a group called the Dallas Gay Political Caucus, DGPC, in the late 1960s. So, again, like right when Stonewall happened. The city's first gay rights movement. We held our first, not a parade, it was a march. Fists in the air, march downtown. It needs to be that again. When I was around 21, I met some guys in the movement who were very masculine. I had thought to be gay, you had to be androgynous, but that never worked for me. I met these guys who were very masculine, hyper masculine, in fact. Some of them wore motorcycle jackets occasionally, and they didn't look anything like the quintessential leather men or anything. I asked them, "Where do you hang out? I don't see you at the bars." They said, "We go to Sundance Kids." I asked some other people about Sundance Kids, and they said, "No, don't go in there. That's dangerous." So I went. And I think that's so, so important. We have, especially if you were a 1990s kid like me, early mid, not so sure about later, but anyway, if you were early mid 1990s kids, so I'm just going to say 1995, a lot of the times, unfortunately, we heard that's so gay. We had this stereotype in our head of having a feminine accent if you were a gay man, or if you were a lesbian, you had to be very butch. So, like there's nothing wrong with the butch image. I'm just saying for the sake of explaining this for those unfamiliar who might be who just weren't around that, or are a little too young to have had experienced that. Being gay was a butt of a joke. It was the punchline in a sitcom or something like that. Or they whisper very loudly in the very obvious, obnoxious way, "Is that gay?" Or something like that. That's what he's getting at here. And unfortunately, when it went up into the 90s and early 2000s, thankfully, with the It Gets Better movement, yes, there were problems with that, but with the It Gets Better movement, we did seriously start to break down those stereotypes. Gay people were just, regular people, you and me, that kind of thing. Back to the book. I knew that I needed to fit in because they had a dress code. They had a guy at the door. "You don't look right. You didn't get in." I went to the Army Navy store and I got myself a leather jacket and sat in the parking lot for weeks just looking at the door like, I'm gonna go in. And eventually I got the nerve to go in. They didn't say anything at the door. I walked up to the bar and I said, "I'll have a martini up." The bartender looked at me and said, "Nah, you want a beer." And I said, "No, no, no, martini up." He said, "No, trust me, you want a beer." I got a bottle of beer, a long neck. I stood over by the wall. I just looked and watched. I'm shy. And I realized that he did do me a favor. If I had a martini, I would have never fit in. And he could tell that I wanted to fit in. So I kept going back and I just kept sipping beer and watching. Eventually, people would talk to me. I went to the little leather shop downstairs and I got some word I can't pronounce. Ocortriments. Let me see what that word is because I've never seen that word before and I'm 31. Acoutrements. If I had to take a guess, I'd say it's about accessories. Okay. Uh, accoutrement. I think that's how you say it. An accessory item of equipment or dress, military equipment rather than uniforms and weapons, outward forms of recognition, strapping. So basically, it's accessories. I'll ask my partner that because they're very familiar with military history. They'll probably know that word. Anyway, so he goes down to the leather shop downstairs and he gets these accessories. Eventually, I got into more of it, but I never really got into any real adult S period, M period circles at the time. It was just sort of masculine guys having rough kinds of physical rolling in the sheets. I didn't have that much rolling in the sheets because I was really shy. Oh, bless him. And I say bless him because he's saying he's shy. It's funny because before that, I only ever had rolling in the sheets. I mean, honest to God, rolling into sheets with a woman only once when I was 17. And then when I was 20, I had a seizure. Oh my God. They had me in the hospital for the seizure. They figured it out and they gave me medication and I was fine. And then they said, "Oh, by the way, you've got syphilis." Oh no. If you don't know, syphilis is a serious, potentially serious, hip to hip body fluid disease. If it gets to a severe enough stage, it can get into your bones, make them brittle. It can affect your cognition in your brain. Those fancy puffy wigs they used to wear in like 1800s and whatnot. It was because syphilis was literally taking their hair out. So again, that's the more serious form of the disease. Thankfully, with modern safe practices, we do have barriers to help prevent the transmission of that, and that's also why it's so important to regularly get tested, even if you've only enjoyed the hip, vigorous thrusting once. You can get it from anyone. Gay S word, straight S word, any kind of S word where you're exchanging body fluids. Um, so back to this. Oh, by the way, you have syphilis. And I said, what? I only did it one time. So my mom was giving me shots of penicillin in the butt, and I got over it. But it was the first time I had vigorous thrusting hip motion and I got syphilis. So, I drew the wild card and made me a little gun shy, which is understandable. Joining the community. The reason I gravitated towards leather was because of the masculinity. When my mom found out I was gay, she tried to set me up. The people she was trying to set me up with were drag queens or they were hairdressers. I was like, don't do this. This is not my type of guy. And she was like, well, what type of men do you like? The kind of men you like. We never really talked that much about it, but I just told her, don't do this. Don't set me up anymore. People ask me about the leather community. Where did it come from? How did it happen? And here we go. It started with motorcycle gangs and coming back from the war. By war, they mean World War II. Gail Rubin talks about it much more eloquently than me, but I think it really it really was just a bunch of guys that hung out and danced, subcultures, but it became a community when AIDS hit. A lot of it had to do with the fact that these guys were not going to give up their vigorous hip thrusting in what they did. They would find safe ways to do it. We started educating people, and then it became this community, and it really bonded together. We took care of each other. We took care of guys. There's a little snippet here. Kind of anecdote, that's the word. Gail Rubin is a sex-positive feminist activist and theorist of gender and sex politics who is well respected within the leather community. She helped found a chapter of the Radical Lesbians in 1971, and in 1978 she was one of the founders of Samoys. I'm really hoping I'm saying that right. The first known lesbian S.M. group. Samoys was very good in queer history. It's really a shame that modern queer circles don't talk about them more. They were extremely important in American queer history. Among her influential writings were The Traffic in Women, Notes on the Political Economy of Beep Word, 1975, and Thinking Beep, Notes for a Radical Theory of the Politics of Sexuality, 1984. She earned her PhD in 1994 with a dissertation titled The Valley of Kings, Leather Men in San Francisco, 1960 to 1990. On a side note, I really want my PhD, but expensive. Back to the actual story, because that was the end of the anecdote up here. Once I got involved in Dallas Gay Political Caucus, I got exposed to a lot of the real community, and a lot of them were lesbians. I did a lot of work with them. One of them ran a computer dating service. Aww. And she introduced me to a guy who ended up becoming my first boy, my first partner. My involvement in activism is what got me into activism. Sorry, that sentence read kind of weird. I was never the A-list activist. I was always the B-list. My first relationship that I had with a guy was a daddy boy relationship. So they're saying they have a affectionate type of consensual relationship between two men. The daddy boy relationship is specific to 18 plus circles, where again the consensual power exchange is based on affection, very loving, very tender. It's the same way a vanilla straight couple might say, hey baby, I love you so much, and the girl might say, oh yeah, I love you too, you're the best boyfriend in the world. It's that kind of like soft core like first romance type sensation feelings. It's that very lovey-dovey couple. That's the general feeling vibe to it. So that was this person's first relationship, and it ended up becoming craziness because he was an alcoholic and an addict, and I was in Alcoholics Anonymous. Great partner. I should have known the relationship was not destined to work, and when the first time we get together, he's shooting up, I go, whatever you do is, but we go But we got together in a leather relationship. We moved out of the suburbs and got a house, bought a dog, did the whole thing. I lost touch with a lot of people. It may have saved my life because we were not, we were mutually exclusive, or at least I thought we were. Most of the people I lost touch with because of HIV. They developed AIDS and died. The leather community got hit really hard in Dallas, like it did in San Francisco, kind of like a first wave. So if you don't know, um, the HIV/AIDS pandemic really, really hit the queer community hard. There was a lot of bias in science studies. It made this whole fear basically the modern equivalent of a witch hunt with if you were seen as a gay man or a lesbian woman or a cross-dresser, transgender, anything like that, you were seen as you have this filthy disease. You don't belong in the community. And the United States really dragged their feet with helping these people because ew, gay. Like we can make that. I don't want to say joke, but we can think about it in that kind of way. Um, but it really hurt the community, and there's still a lot of resentment towards how everything was handled because of that, because we did lose an entire generation of older gay people. And that's why reading this book, The Stonewall Generation, is so important, because we get to hear their stories firsthand. Okay, back to the book. After we split up, I came back to the scene. A lot of friends were gone. I kept up with a couple of good friends, Frank and Carmen. Frank died. I didn't know it was I didn't know it was HIV. I thought it was cancer. I mean, he was older. Carmen was a good buddy. He and I played a lot, and we worked together. And he was producer for the United Negro College Fund for their telethon. Telethons were old school ways of, you call in and say, I donate $5 or something like that. And you would literally just see like a TV screen, a bunch of people on phones. And it was their way of saying, hey, I want to give money to this cause. It was like, it's kind of like ye old school charity fundraising. I worked with him on that, and we tried it here in Dallas. We put together a whole package, and we got the mayor and everybody involved. And I worked with him on that a few times. I produced a couple of shows with him. He was HIV positive. Then I lost touch with him, and when I finally got in touch with him, he was in the hospital. HIV/AIDS was a death sentence back then. We just didn't have the medicine to help them like we do today, or anyone with HIV. I went to visit him. He looked like a shadow. He was always this big guy. Now he was a little skinny guy. He looked like a child. Luckily, I managed to see him before he died, but it was hard times. AIDS is still hard. When I got really close to my leather lesbian friends, I went to visit a friend in the hospital, Tony, the first time he was hospitalized. The nurses weren't changing his sheets. They had the infectious disease symbol on the door, and they wouldn't go in. A couple of lesbian friends would come in and change the sheets, clean him up, take care of him. The nursing staff wouldn't do it because they were that ignorant. Even when we knew it was more than casual exposure, that was a bonding experience. Not the greatest way to bond, but it was through adversity. And unfortunately, this bias against HIV positive patients is still very true. I have seen nurses with full degrees and everything, not the personal assistant or certified nursing assistant, full blown registered nurses. So basically, the highest level of nursing you can get, be afraid to touch an HIV positive or AIDS patient because they legitimately think it spreads through the air when it doesn't. You need to touch body fluids. So, mucus from the nose, tears from the eyes, the blood in your veins, any fluid transmission if you are getting intimate with someone, that kind of thing. It does not travel through the air like a lot of medical professionals think it does. Next area, civil rights, a rabbi, and Tarzan. My activism came from watching the civil rights movement in the 1960s, seeing the injustice there. When I first came out in the gay community, it was just post Stonewall. Barely in the first gay bar I used to go to before I discovered the Sundance Kids Leather Bar was the Bayou Club. I was in the old antebellum house over the Hall Street. It was a dance club. Excuse me. They do barbecues and whatever on Sunday, so you go there and you dance. But they had a light come on if the police were coming in. So if you were dancing with a guy, you had to find a woman. And if you are a woman dancing with a woman, you had to find a guy. You had to find a opposite sex partner. That would get raided all the time. The lights would flash, 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 and all of a sudden everybody is, "Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you." And if you weren't wearing at least 3 articles of male clothing or gendered clothing, you could be arrested for cross dressing. I mean, there were all these weird little annoyance rules, and they would regularly come through and bust people. So I didn't like that either. I knew that police didn't raid certain clubs, and they didn't raid, but why was that? I need to know why they got money. Sorry, I'm gonna read that again because my brain skipped ahead and blurred things together. So I didn't like that either with them busting people, and I knew that the police didn't raid certain clubs, and why didn't they raid certain clubs? I know why. They got money. And the mafia ran a lot of these bars, and until recently, organized crime has been involved in it. Last 20 years or so. I look back at the Compton's cafeteria riots in California in 1966. Different dynamic, but everything was bubbling at that time. In the 1960s, the music of the time, something's happening here. It was in the air and it was bound to happen. The first woman that I had beef with was a hippie, a genuine dyed in the wool hippie, that the one I caught syphilis from. But she was a friend of mine, and that's who I'd hang out with. We'd smoke marijuana, and that was the time. It felt liberating. Growing up, I had a rabbi who was great. He marched in Selma and met with Dr. King. His name was Levi Olan. He's got a great book called Maturity in an Immature World. Worth a read. And he used to do regular sermons on the radio stations here. He was a Reformed Jew. He wasn't Orthodox. So his sermons were secular more than anything. He was against the war in Vietnam because that was going on at the time. Um, he was really a firebrand. He pissed everybody off. So we'd go to the Friday night services and he'd give these sermons, and then we'd go out to dinner after. And oh, the talk was great. That's really where I got my liberalism. And then, boy, did I like Tarzan. I had a crush on Johnny Wellsmuller. I'm assuming that's a celebrity of the time. And on Buster Crabbe. There is a show, it was called Captain Gallant of the Foreign Legion. I don't know if you've ever been to Buster Crabbe, ever seen Buster Crabbe. Again, celebrity of the time, I'm assuming. He was a good looking guy. I just love watching the show and Gladiator movies. I love the Gladiator movies, and I thought, why do I like this? Excuse me. Sorry, I'm just glancing ahead to see what's going on here because this looks like it is okay. Uh okay, we should be able to finish, what is this? 95. We should be able to finish 10 pages in an hour. So, anyway, zooming back in. Act Up. I knew some people in Act Up. They would go down to the plaza in the front of City Hall at night and trace figures, and they did it fast. Then in the morning, there was all these chalk figures, like a crime scene. They did that kind of stuff. They chained themselves to monuments and stuff, and then I say we, I barely participated, uh, but there was a big vacant lot just adjacent to the gay neighborhood that was going to be developed into a high rise, but it never happened. It was a big pit and it just sat there. One night, the ACT UP guys got crosses with the name of people who died and made it into a cemetery. Next morning, you wake up and it looks like Arlington National Cemetery, except there were these little makeshift crosses and no one would touch it. The police wouldn't touch it, the landlord, nobody would touch it. It sat that way for months, and it made a great statement. AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power began at the height of the AIDS crisis in March 1987. Larry Kramer was asked to speak at the New York City Lesbian and Gay Community Services Center and asked the audience if they wanted to start a new organization focused on political action. 2 days later, 300 people met and ACT UP, a radical direction action group united in anger to end the AIDS pandemic, was formed. This is before Names Project's AIDS Memorial quilt. I love the quilt. I wish it were something more permanent, but I understand the theory behind it. You know, the first time the quilt came to Dallas, just rows and rows of panels, friends went down, and there were docents. Their job was basically to help hand out Kleenex. I remember walking through. I marched on Washington in 1979. That was the first gay rights march on Washington. I was there with the Dallas delegation. Ambidexual. In high school, I knew I liked guys. A friend of mine in high school, one of my best friends, and I did a lot of experimentation. I also experimented with women in high school, but the guys were always better to be with. It really floated my boat. And by 1968, I was ready to say I was gay. Today, I call myself queer. I do that because in my consensual play with other humans, I play with men. I play with women. I play with people who are transgender. It doesn't matter to me. There's always an element of it that's erotic and it works for me. But affectionately, I'm gay. My longest affectional relationship have always been with men. My boy now, we've been together for 22 years. This is starting our 23rd year and it feels like, yesterday. So that's been a good relationship. And I can't imagine anybody else who would put up with me. We complete each other. But if we're talking LGBTQ, I don't know what you'd say. Maybe bisexual, queer, or ambidexual. So I think that's a really important part because especially with like the modern landscape of the LGBTQ community, we see people accusing other real people of whatever orientation, and if they don't fit the prescribed box they have for this orientation and their, I guess, expectations that they put on someone, it's not really a fair comparison because, as you just heard me read here, it's very intense. Sorry, I had to hand something to a partner. Anyway, um, as I was saying, these circles are very complicated. Very rarely do people fit these pre-described notions of what someone is, gay, lesbian, trans, whatever, perfectly in whatever box we have said this is the definition of. A lot of people, for example, today say the definition of lesbian is anybody who experiences queer attraction to women. And when you ask someone to define queer attraction, at least for me, I say it is loving women in such a way that is not the same way as a cis man loves a cis woman. It's very hard to define beyond that because, at least here in America, we are trained, quote unquote, since a very young age to, oh, if you're a little girl, you're going to be a wife, you're going to play with dolls, you're going to play house, you're going to, help the family, that kind of thing. If you're a little boy, you're taught very young, oh, you got to be the man of the house, you have to protect the house, you got to do all these very macho masculine things, you got to be good with handiwork and all that stuff. And like, that's like fine, quote unquote, individually, but it shouldn't be forced onto people as a whole. And when you get down to it linguistically, queer just means odd, or that's not the way an average person would do something. So that's the best explanation I can give. But again, this is why I'm reading this to everyone, because aside from we get to hear from the older voices within the LGBTQ community, we also get to hear that orientation's hard. Sensuality is hard. Vigorous hip thrusting with figuring out what you like, what you don't like is hard. You might enjoy one thing with one gender that you absolutely hate with another gender or something like that. So the long of the short is this is hard to figure out, and it's okay to play with labels. It's okay to say, the way I approach this is not considered typical, so it's atypical, but I still feel like I vibe with the community. So, shrug. Magic tricks, cameras, and having fun with people consensually. I was never really closeted. I just didn't talk about it necessarily. I never tried to hide anything. I've always been attracted to showbiz in one way or another, and I had been an amateur magician as a kid. That was the way I got over shyness. I was always shy, and by doing magic tricks, I knew something you didn't, and that made me a little less shy. I still draw on that today because I'm still a shy person. I mean, if it were up to me, I'd be sitting on a corner having a cup of coffee just watching. With Woodhall Summit, I have to go and schmooze with people. Wears me out. Like when I do presentations. Afterwards, I have to go up to my hotel room and collapse because it wears me out. It's a persona. The Woodhull Freedom Foundation's annual Sexual Freedom Summit brings together hundreds of activists, educators, researchers, community leaders on an annual basis to share knowledge, gain tools, and inspire all those working against injustice and sexual freedom. I started doing television by accident. I had a friend who was a magician who was working on the Bozo show as the ringmaster, Paul Osborne. He said, "Hey, why don't you come down and do funny voices?" He was a magician too. He said, "We're going to have a character for you. You be Professor Tweety Foofer." I said, "Sure, what the hell?" I always wanted to get into television and communication, so I came down and put on all this makeup and I became Professor Tweety Foofer. Sort of a uh, Viennese comic. I do an accent and all that, and it was fun. The station said, "I tell you what, I'll hire you during the day to run camera on stock market show. Do you know how to run a camera?" I said, "Oh, sure." And I lied. And so I learned how to run a camera, and I ran the stock market show during the day. There was only one cameraman for two cameras. You'd go and do one, and then you'd run over to the other and have somebody yelling in your ear all the time, running back and forth. And then in the afternoon, I'd do Bozo. That's where I met my friend Mike. He and his wife and I had this thing, wink, going on. It was great. It was showbiz. You could do anything. Everybody slept with everybody. It was wild. Our channel coordinator on the show was a wonderful lesbian named Star Proctor. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. Star was crazy and rode a motorcycle and wore these carpet vests. You know, the sort of 1960s hippie stuff and bell bottoms. And she always had a cigarette holder. We got along great. She was a great talker. She talked to the Dallas Zoo into giving us one of their lion cubs to raise on the show. So, because of her, I got to take a lion cub home twice a week and raise a lion cub in my house. That's adorable, but if you are a person without the proper licenses, please don't do that. They're wild animals. It never occurred to me not to be out. I never really had to hide it, and even when I had my live show company with the same guy, Paul. When we did the March on Washington, I used our conference room for our conferences because I was doing the press and PR for it. Unfortunately, I have to skip a section because the amount of words I'd have to censor. But if you're reading along or anything like that, I'm only skipping page 99 and 100. I will show this picture because I feel it's important. This is of the leather community. If you are listening to this, it says cast and crew of Hardy's 1996 leather. Photo by John Noting, courtesy of Hardy Haberman. And again, if you're listening, this is a black and white, heavy contrasted photo. We see men with what would be considered typical military leather hat, leather jackets, very like what you think of when you think of a stereotypical biker gang. But that heading area talks about like adult films. It talks about how he explored power, dynamic consensual relationships, that kind of thing, both with words, with how he explored that kind of dynamic with other consensual adults. And again, I want to read it out loud, but I can't because of censorship. So pretend I did. Being an older gentleman, I'm old and I still have vigorous hip thrusting. Yeah, yes, I still have it and I don't plan on stopping soon. I had a heart event last year and they were putting me on blood pressure medication. I was like, doesn't this mess with people's drive to do these things? No, it doesn't. I'm still active and I'm still as hungry for it as when I was a teenager. Well, not quite that, but I didn't know what to do with it then, and I know now. One of the greatest things of being in the letter community is one of my friends told me this when I first got into it. He said, hey, trust me, when you get older, you will still look good in leather. Yeah, it's like the modern thing. You'll still look good with tattoos. Anyway, for some reason, there are people that find it more attractive and they go, oh, yeah. And I'm not going to engage in that dynamic with you, but you consider me that. And they're attracted to that. Again, censorship that I have to do because of algorithms, social media, etc. There's a certain admiration for experience, knowledge, and that comes with age. The old guard mythos, whoever taught you, that was old guard. There are some traditions and stuff that I was raised with that I learned that I wasn't raised with them, but I learned. A lot of it has to do with respect and basically mismanners. If you read mismanners, you could be in the leather community. You don't touch what isn't yours. You call people by whatever they want to be called. You're polite. You suit up. You show off. It's pretty simple stuff. I think that really depends on the old guard community you're in because old guard is extremely strict with protocol, how you engage with other people. Um, One of the more difficult things to learn to navigate are the handkerchiefs because the handkerchief placement and color both signify a certain thing. Again, I never really had that much interest in the leather community. I've just, I've had a basic foundational learner thing on that. Anyway, as I get older, I find that just as many people are just as interested in me, which amazes me because I certainly am no specimen and I've certainly let myself go. I've always had body image problems. I know guys that enter a contest called Mr. Prime Choice, which is for older guys, older men in leather, and they'll get up there in very little clothing, their belly hanging there, and they don't care. I think it's terrific. It's shooting the finger at the whole body image idea, the idea of the ideal body. I know a lot of guys who are buff who look really good, and I know a lot of people in the adult industry who are absolutely gorgeous. Some of them are in their 50s and they're still getting work because there's a whole genre of people who love that. More power to them, I love it. There are challenges, as you get older, but Patrick and I still have an active life. It's specific to what we do. What we do is what we do. We don't play as much as we get older. He was never a heavy player, which is fine. I accept that's cool. I can get that elsewhere, but we still get along great. And when I go to events and stuff, there's a lot of interest. Haha. I probably am not any less active than I used to be. So they're talking about consensual power exchange dynamics where, like, oh, I again, using my little wrist thing here, I might smack this on you because I enjoy the reaction and the person receiving it enjoys it because of the endorphins that go off in the head, stuff like that. That's what that was about. Um, Intimacy with Patrick is good. Well, it's not as exciting as 20 years ago, but we were both thinner than haha. We were both more agile then, but it's still good. It's still fun. It's still hot, and it still has its moments, and it's still intense, and that's good. It's unusual. It has to do with the boots. There's always boots involved because he has an incredible boot interest, wink. And I do too. So that works out. Our house looks like a quarter show for boots. There must be 150 pairs of boots, cowboy boots, in the house. Being a leader in the freedom movement. It's fun. It's exhausting. I sometimes feel like I don't know what I'm doing. The mission of Woodhall is something that's important to me. The idea of freedom is always something that's been important to me because I'm a child of the 1960s. That's part of it, but I also think it's just a fundamental human right. It's a foundation of humanity. We're all based on that. I mean, it's where it all starts, right? We're reproductive, whatever. If you're not procreating, it's still one of the fundamental drives. And the fact that in this country we cannot talk about it without tittering or making a joke or being embarrassed or just not talking about it is a sign of deep-seated pathology in the American psyche. Again, this is his voice in the book. That's why I work at Woodhall, because I think we need to change that. And my personal voice on it is I absolutely agree with him. The idea of learning about consent, an okay touch, a not okay touch, how to voice your needs, how to say, hey, I don't like that, stop. Using safe words, that kind of thing. I think it's all very important, regardless if you're in the vanilla community or the let's use this wrist thing on each other because it's fun. I'm using that because it's an easy, silly example. Back to his voice. And now more than ever, we're at a tipping point. And of course, on this tipping point, there's always people that try to pull you back. I don't think they have the strength. It's just annoying as hell. They're going to yell and scream, but they're going to eventually come along. Excuse me. Sorry. Resilience in writing. Writing is the way I maintain my sanity. I learned to start doing it. I was never an author. I learned to write scripts for TV shows and commercials. When I really started writing, when I hit my stride, was when I was writing in my journal. Journaling and doing fourth step for Alcoholics Anonymous. I tried to find a voice, and I found a voice. Good for him. It's a lot more trouble to keep up a facade than it is just to be you. There's a lot more trouble to keep a stiff upper lip than it is to just break down. I'm guilty of keeping a stiff upper lip, but also sometimes I just turn into a puddle. I don't like the idea of people imposing themselves on somebody else. I don't like bullies. I was always bullied in school. I was a fat kid with glasses. The bullying wasn't bad, but it was just enough to be annoying. I didn't turn it inward, which was good. I just became a magician, which is weird, but I retreated into that. It gave me something to do, and I've always felt that there are people that can't be out, so maybe I have to be out for them. There is a bit of truth in that. My dad and mom, my dad especially used to say, you've got to be an example. He never told me what or why, but as I've grown up, I've always thought, well, maybe that's the truth because everybody's an example for somebody else. The way you live your life is an example for somebody else. I got into recovery and Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't attract people by advertising. You attract people by living in a program. Then they see it and say, oh, I want what you have. So that's where resilience comes from. I've attended a lot of protests, a lot of marches. I was never hit by water cannons, never chased or anything like that. It just felt like the right thing to do. My dad wasn't necessarily liberal, but he was a smart guy, and he was empathetic and did a lot of work. He willed his library and all of his papers to a historically black college he used to work with on a regular basis. It was just the right thing to do. It felt right to him, and that's what he did. When I was a kid, we'd have visitors from India and Taiwan. They'd stay with us because that's what you did at the time. It gave me a good ground to understand there's a lot of diversity in this world. They gave me some resilience too. And we are on the last header. Words of wisdom. Words of wisdom, oh geez. Always take a good physic every day. Have a good movement. I think that's the most important thing I've learned is to not take yourself so seriously. It's hard to do. For example, this mess here on my face, when I bashed my face. I fell out of bed, right? It was early in the morning and I was reaching over to get my watch to see what time it was. We have a high bed, and as I was reaching over, I just went whop. I wasn't knocked out, but I was in pain. When I looked up, Patrick said, oh, you're going to have a shiner. My vanity kicked in, and I went in the bathroom and looked at my face, and I was like, ugh. Jane's gonna be interviewing me in 3 or 4 days, and what the hell, what am I gonna do? Then I realized, it's your vanity kicking in, but it affected me. So then I said, okay, I cannot let it affect me this seriously. So I published a picture of it online. I put it online. The first person who contacted me was my friend, Reggie Bibbs. He's out of Houston. He has a disease, neurofibromatosis. One half of his face is profoundly mutated. He speaks all over the place, and he travels all over the place, educating people about this disease. He was the first person to contact me and said, I hope you're okay. And I thought, boy, if there were ever a smack in the head, it was so profound. It was like, holy smokes, of course he'd be the first one. We don't even talk that much, and he's the first person who contacts me. If there was ever taking yourself too seriously, and I was like, hello. And so Reggie contacted me, and it was like, okay, get your butt up, get on with it. So we don't take yourself too seriously. And the second thing is just do it. Just get out there and bloody do it, Because if you sit around and just keep getting ready to do it, you'll never get there. And you just got to do it, It's gotten me into a lot of trouble, and it's also gotten me into a lot of success. Patrick and I have always based our relationship on a trust factor, on a reality factor, We don't put a lot of expectations on each other. Neither of us can do 24/7, as everybody seems to be doing it now because we know that's not real. So he's my boy when we're playing. In the dungeon, in the bedroom, he's my boy. He calls me sir. In regular life, we're just a couple of guys. That works for us. He knew I did BDSM presentations. Bees do so much. I told him, when I go out, I play with a lot of people. I'm doing all this stuff. He said, yeah, I know. But I'm not going to go home with anybody. He still just makes me smile. And that is the end of that chapter. Um, I liked it. I thought it was a good, come back to the book because again, I've made it through a little bit of this book. I just never got back to it, but I found this book at a LGBTQ Pride little like artist alley setup. It was a free book in like one of those boxes, and I just grabbed it because I was like, oh, this is really important. So I think that's that. I really enjoyed reading. I enjoyed trying to help educate the viewers, and I learned a little bit myself. So, tomorrow I have a lot of doctor's appointments, which is Wednesday, so I will not be streaming then. However, I will be streaming on Thursday, and we will be going back to this book, and we're just going to take it chapter by chapter. So, thank you so very much for joining us. I'm planning to actually stream regularly again. We're going to be reading and all that lovely jazz. So, again, follow me on my socials here. Same socials as always. Curlixima on Twitter, Sylvie Jinx on Blue Sky, and that's what we're gonna do. Patreon is very cheap because I realize everyone and their mother has a Patreon. My Patreon is Krolixima, KROLIKZIMA, and we get to vote on what book we're going to be reading next. We get to have, it's basically like a little mini book club, all of us people. We get to talk about the books. We get to, review books, either what we want to read, we stopped reading, whatever. So that's that. Again, thank you so very much for joining us, and I will see you guys in 2 days. Bye.